How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another exciting video, and in this video I'm going to show you guys how to upload images. So right here we have a Next.js front end running, where we have a file input field where you can put an image and then also the alt text for the image, and you can upload the image. Then here on the right we see the images being displayed. So we're sending this off from our Next.js front end to a Django backend, and then that Django backend ends up storing a model using that image file, and then we send the request off to go and display these images. So we see all these images here being displayed. So let's go ahead and see how this works. So I click this, and then I can pick something I want to upload, let's say this tent. So I open that up. Now I have the tent here. I can put the alt text, so something like camping tent, let's say. Or maybe you can do like cool camping tent, upload that, and then we will see it displayed right over here because we just uploaded it. So if you think this is cool, then go ahead and check out this video where I'll show you guys how to implement this. All right, so now let's go ahead and see how we can accomplish this. All right, so I have a VS Code editor open right now where I opened up a folder which I called image upload. So I recommend using VS Code as your editor, but if you want to use something else, then you can always feel free to do that as well. So you're going to need a few things. You're going to need Node on your system. So I'm using Node version 14.16.1. You're going to want Python, and then the version of Python that I'm using is 3.9.5. So if you use these versions, then you'll have the exact same thing as myself. If you want to use something different, then your project should work as well, so that's fine. And then you're also going to want PostgreSQL, since that's what I'm going to use for my database. And then let me also go ahead and create my database just so I can use that. If you don't have Postgres or PostgreSQL, then just go ahead and search it in Google. So it's as easy as just going Postgres, opening this up. You're going to click on download, and then just download for your system. Let's say Mac OS. You'd click that, and then download the installer, and then just download the appropriate installer. So that's if you don't have PostgreSQL, and then if you don't have Node, just search for Node. If you don't have Python, search for Python. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and set up our database. I'm going to do psql-u postgres so I can open this up. And now I have this right here, which means I'm inside of PostgreSQL. So let me create a database. I'm going to do create database. I'm going to call this image upload. And then I'm going to set the owner to Postgres. And then you can also set a password for your user by doing \password and then entering a password. I already have one, so I'm not going to do that. And I'm just going to quit out of this with \q. All right, so now that I have a database ready to go, let me go ahead and start working in here. So I'm going to want a separate folder for my Django backend, and then I'm also going to have a separate folder for my Next.js frontend. So I'm going to go ahead, create my backend folder. I'm going to navigate inside of there, and then I'm also going to have another terminal. And then with this terminal, right now I'm navigated in this sort of like root area. So what I'm going to do is run a command which is going to start building my Next.js frontend. So I'm going to do npx create-next-app, and then the name of my app, which I'm going to call frontend. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and then that's going to create this frontend folder, which is going to be my Next.js project. So while that's going on, let me go into my other terminal and start setting up this Django backend. So first thing I want to do is create a virtual environment. So I'm going to do python 3-m venv, and then the name of the folder, which is going to be venv, and that's going to create a file which I can use to activate a virtual environment where I can install Python packages, which are going to be installed inside of this virtual environment instead of on my global system. So right now I have this venv thing, so let me now do source venv bin activate so I can activate my virtual environment. If you're on Windows, you'll do something like ./venv /scripts /activate. If you spell activate right, so activate, there we are. So you would do something like this on Windows. And then once you're in here, you can install your Python packages. And if you see this right here, that means you're in your virtual environment. I'm going to do pip install. I'm going to need Django. I'm going to need Django Rest Framework for my REST API. And then I'm going to need psycopg2 and psycopg2-binary so I can communicate with PostgreSQL. And then I'm going to want Pillow so I can have image uploads. And then I'm also going to want Django-cores-headers because my Next.js frontend is going to be on a different port compared to my Django backend. So this is going to allow my frontend to actually send off requests to my backend. And then I believe this is all I need. If I need anything else, I'll just go ahead and install it. So I'm going to run that. Let's see how we're progressing with our Next.js frontend. So that's all done. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to organize this a little bit differently. I'm going to have a source folder, and then inside of that source folder, I'm going to have this pages. And then I'm also going to get rid of this default styling that they have. Just going to delete that. I'm going to also delete this hello.js that they have. And then I'm going to delete the 2 files that they have here as well, since I want to create these myself. All right, so we're just starting off on a clean slate here. So let me go back to my terminal here. So this is still installing packages. So while that's going on, let me just start working on this Next.js front end then. So I'm going to create my index.js. So this is going to be when I go to localhost 3000, this is the page that's going to open up. So let me go ahead and create this component. I'll zoom in a little bit so it's more clear. And I'll close up that side window. So I'm going to do const homepage. So I like to name these components with the word page after, just because it helps with having less conflicts in Next.js. So I'm going to create this component. And then for now, I'm going to have it say just homepage. And then I can do export default homepage. And then when you're using Next.js, you don't have to do the import React from React. That's just by default in there. So I'll save that. And then that's the only page I need. And then I'm also going to have my underscore app.js. And then here I'll do const app. I'm gonna destructure the props of component and page props. And then actually I'm going to use round parentheses here since I'm just going to be returning JSX. And then what I'll be returning is a fragment first off, just because I'm going to have a head. And then I'm also going to have my component. So I'll show what I mean in a second. So let me import head from next/head. And then what I can do with this head component is I can bring it in like this. And then I can do things like set a title. So I can do something like image upload app as my title. I can have a meta tag, so meta with name equal to description, and then content equal to the content. So I can do like image upload app tutorial, something like that. And then you can also do things like bring in different CDNs. So for example, I'm going to want Bootstrap in here just to make the styling a little easier. So let me go search for Bootstrap. And then I'll open that up here. And then I'll click on this get started, and then I'll find that CDN. So that's right over here. So I can just copy that and then just paste it into here. And then I'll put this on separate lines just so it's a little bit cleaner. All right, and then I'll just use the single quotes, and there we go. So now I should have Bootstrap inside of this file. And maybe I'll do it like this. There we are. So now I can go to, actually I have to run my front end if I want to check out my app. So let me go ahead and do that. So you can do that by running npm run dev in the terminal. So that's going to run your Next.js front end, and something's going wrong here. And the thing that's going wrong is that I didn't actually navigate inside of my front end. So should do that first, then I can run npm run dev, and then that's going to go ahead and run my front end. Or then I can go to localhost 3000 inside of my browser, and then I should see that front end running. So let's see if we got that Bootstrap styling, so the text should look a little nicer if we do have it. And then another thing I actually have to do is inside of my app, let me close up this terminal, close up that side window. I also have to have my component here. So I'm going to have a div where then I bring in my component, and then I'm also going to have spread operator with page props. And then inside of this div, I'm going to have a class name of container just to have a little bit of wrapping around my components. So let's, oh yeah, and also have to export this app. So export default app. So now that I have that, we should see homepage here. So here we are. So that's looking good. And we also see the container, which means that Bootstrap was successfully brought inside of here. All right, so I can now close that up. And let's start working on our backend first. So I'll go into my backend folder right now. I can open up that side window, and then I'm going to clear my terminal. And then the thing I want to do is first create my project. So I'm going to do Django-admin, start project, and then I'm going to call this image upload. And then I'll put a dot to put it in the current directory, which is inside of my backend. So I'll run that. So now my backend will have this image upload project, and I'll have this manage.py, and then I'm going to do Python manage.py, start app, and then I'll call this app image. This is going to be where I actually implement my API logic for doing things like getting the images inside of our application and also for uploading images. So that's where I'm going to implement the URLs and the views that'll handle that logic. All right, so first off, let me go inside of my image upload, settings.py. I'm going to close up that terminal side window, and then let's go into our installed apps and bring in a few things. So I need Rest Framework. I need CORS headers. And then I need that app I just created, which is called image. And then I believe that's all. And then above my common middleware, I'll do CORS headers dot middleware dot CORS middleware. And then I'm going to have at the bottom, so let's say right over here, I can have my CORS origin whitelist. And then the thing I want to whitelist is HTTP localhost 3000. So I've got that. And then let me also bring in OS because Django 3 right now doesn't by default import this, and I'm going to need this. And then let me adjust my database settings. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to be using PostgreSQL. The name of my database I called image upload. So I have the name and then the host, or let me do the user first. So user. So Postgres, I'm going to have the password, which in my case is password123. So I already showed you guys how you can set a password, so go ahead and set one for yourself. And then the host, which is localhost. So that sets up the database for me. And then let me adjust these static settings. So in particular, the only thing I really need is like a media URL, which is going to be /media/ and then the media root, which is going to be os.path.join, base directory, media is where I'm going to place that, and then that should be good, and I don't really need any other settings here. And then I also need my REST framework settings. I'll do those, say right here. So I'll do REST framework, which is going to be a dictionary where I have default, permission, classes, which is going to be a list, and then I'm going to have my REST framework.permissions.allow. Any is going to be what I have for my default permissions. All right, so that's out of the way. So let me create my image model. So for my image model, the only thing I really want is to have an image and then an alt text. And then that's going to be everything that represents this model for me. So I'm going to have class image, and then I'm going to pass in models.model. So I'm going to have my image, which is going to be models.image field. And then I'm going to have an upload to, and I'm going to upload to something like images/. And then I'm going to have my alt text, which is going to be a character field. And I'm going to set a max length of 255. I'll have my string representation of this model, where I pass in self, and I'll return self.altText as the string representation. And then I'll go ahead and save that. And let's now migrate these changes. So I'm going to do a Python manage.py, make migrations. Let me try that again. Python manage.py, make migrations. And it seems I spelt this incorrectly twice. So let me go ahead and copy this and just paste it in so I stop spelling this wrong. Whoops, without that question mark. There we go. Finally managed to do that. So let me clear this, do a Python manage.py migrate. So I can migrate this to my PostgreSQL database. And then I can do a Python manage.py run server, and I'll just have that running so I can check if I make some kind of typos and such. So let me close this up, and then I'll make a urls.py so I can set up my endpoints. And then I don't want this inside of here, but I want that inside of my image. So urls.py, because this is where my app is. And then I can do from django.urls import path. Not path like that, but like this. And then I can have my URL patterns, which is going to be my list of paths. All right, so I'm going to have two paths. So I'm going to have, oops, not like that. So I'm going to have two paths, and I'm going to set these up in a second. Let me first open up my views.py. And then one thing I'm going to need is from Django.views. I'm going to need my API view. Then I'm going to have two classes. One's going to be for getting images that I already have. One's going to be for uploading images. So I'm going to have one that's like retrieve image view. And then from there, I can pass in my API view so I can extend that functionality. I'll define a get request, pass in self, request, format, none. And then I'll have a pass for now. And then I'm going to have my class for upload image view, pass in API view. This is going to be a post request since I'll be creating data in my database, and then I'll pass in self and request, and I'll do a pass for now. And then inside of here, I'm going to bring in those views. So from .views, I can import my retrieve image view and also my upload image view. And then I can pass in my retrieve image view here, do a .as view since I'm using class-based views, and then here I'll do my upload image view .as view. And then I can go inside of my urls.py here. And then let me import include, since I'm going to need that. And then I'll make a path, which is API/image/, and then I'll include my image.urls. Put a comma here. So image is going to be this app right here. And then I'm going to grab the URL so that I pass on the URLs onto that file. So I'm going to have API/image/, and then I'll do something like retrieve images, and then I'll have API/image/upload for uploading the images. So now I have my two endpoints set, and then I'll have to implement the logic for these endpoints. All right, so let's see how we could accomplish this. So for this get one, let me bring in my model. So I'll do from .models, I'll import my image model. And then I'll also have a serializer, which will just make it easier for me to serialize the data and pass it back to my front end. So inside of image, I'm going to create a file called serializers. So serializers.py, did I spell that right? Serializers, looks good. And then I'm going to do from Rest Framework, import serializers. I'll make a class. Let me also bring in my actual model from .models. I'll import my image model. And then I'll do class image serializer, where I pass in serializers.model serializer. And then I'll have a class of meta. And then inside of here, I'm going to have my model, which I set to my image model. And then I'll have the fields that I serialize, which I'm just going to have as all the fields. So just like that. And let's see if I spelled something wrong here. So serializers.model serializer. Let's check out my terminal. So, oh yeah, so this is coming from my views here. Let me do a pass for now. See if things are in order. Looks like things are not in order. So cannot import name API view. And the reason for that is that I should have REST framework dot views here. So there we are. So no errors inside of here. That's good. So now let me do from .serializers. Let me import my image serializer. And let's see how we can accomplish this. So I'm going to wrap this whole request in a try except. And then in the case where something goes wrong, I'll turn a response, which is just going to have some kind of error that says something went wrong when retrieving images. Then I'll have a status of status.http 500 internal server error. Something like that. So let me bring in some of these things I need. So from REST framework dot response, I'll import my response. And then from REST framework, I'll import my status. All right, so in this case, I'm just going to retrieve the images. So first I'm going to see if there are any images in the first place. So if image.objects.all.exists, then I'm going to return those images. Otherwise, I'll just return some kind of error response. And then that's just going to say like that there's no images. No images found. And I'll just have something like a 400 bad request, let's say. So 400 bad request. And then also, by the way, here you don't have to do it like this. I could also do something like 400, but I think it's good to explicitly write it like this, so that's the way that I do it. So anyway, we're going to see if this exists. If it does, perfect. We're going to retrieve our images. So images is going to be image.objects.all. So I'm going to retrieve all of the images. I'm going to serialize them. So I'll do images is image serializer. Pass in my images that I retrieved, and then I'll do many equals true to have this as a list. And then I can pass that back in a response. So I can just return response where I have my images. So that's going to be images.data is the way I can access that serialized data. And then I'll just have a status of status.htp 200 OK. So that's going to be the logic for my retrieving of the images. And then for uploading images, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to have to grab my data. Let me also do a try except like I did previously in case if something goes wrong. I'll grab this error response, plug it in here, and then let's do something like something went wrong when uploading image. All right. And then I'll do data is self.request.data. And then I'm going to want two fields to retrieve. I'm going to want my image, which I'll grab from data image, and then I'm going to want my alt text, which I'll grab from data alt text. And then from there, I can just create my image. So I can do image.objects.create. And then the two things I need to pass to this is the image and the alt text. So I'll do image is equal to image, and alt text is alt text. So I need to make sure I retrieve these things in my request. And then finally, I can just return some kind of response. And then this response is just going to be like a success message, and it'll say image uploaded successfully. And then I'll have a status of status.http 201 created because we just created something inside of our database. So that should be all the logic that we really need for our backend. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and now tackle our front end. And then let me also check out my server. So things seem to still be running fine. So that's awesome. So let's open up my index.js, and now let's start tackling this part. All right, so I'm going to want some logic in here. So I'm going to wrap this in curly braces because I will have some kind of like form data. And then I'm also going to make my API requests. So since I will be making API requests, one thing I'm going to want is Axios. So npm install save Axios. Now you could also use fetch API, but I'll just use Axios since that's what I like to use. So while that's installing, let me start tackling this. I also know I'm going to need Axios in this file, so I'll just import that right away. So import Axios from Axios. And then I'm going to have some kind of data that I need. So in particular, I'm going to need the image that I upload, and then I'm also going to need the alt text. Now, I'm going to use state in order to manage this. So at the top, I'm going to import use state, and then that's going to come from React. And then also on this component mounts, a good thing to do is to make a request to retrieve my images. So that's another thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to bring in my use effect as well. And then here, let me make my first piece of state. So image, set image will be use state. And by default, it'll be null. I'm going to have my alt text. So alt text and set alt text. And this by default is going to be an empty string. I'm also going to want my images. So const images. And then set images, which will be use state. And then for this, I'll, let's say, do null. And then after that, I'm going to have my use effect. And then when this component mounts, what I'm going to do is make my request. So let me do const config. Here I'm going to have my headers. And then I'm going to have my accept header, which will be application/JSON. Now you don't really have to pass this, but I like to be a little more explicit, so I'm going to go ahead and pass this along, and then I'll make my API request. Now this is going to be asynchronous, so because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function inside of here called fetch data, which is going to be an asynchronous arrow function, and then I'm going to call that. Then inside of here, I'm going to have a try catch where I make my API request. Let me also close that side window. So I have const response is await axios.get http localhost 8000 /API /image, and then slash, I believe I called it retrieve images. Let me double check. So urls.py, and yeah, retrieve images. So I'll just copy that, just so I don't make any typos. Close that up, close the side window, and then paste this in here. Whoops. Paste this in here, there we go. And then pass in my config. And then if we get a response.status of 200, that means we're successful. So in that case, I'm going to do a set images. And then I'm going to set that to my response.data. And let's check out our response.data. So inside of image views.py, our response.data is going to have this images that we're going to want to access. And then that's going to be our array of images. So I'm going to do response.data.images. And then from there, we're going to be able to map through this images and then display them. All right, so right now what I'm going to do is, inside of here, I'm going to pass a class name, put some margin at the top. And then I'm going to want a row. So I'm going to have div with a class name of row. And then I'm going to have two columns. So first I'm going to have div with a class of call-5. And then this one's going to be a class name of call-6. And then I want a little bit of spacing, so I'm also going to do offset 1. So these are bootstrap classes for having 2 rows and then having a little bit of offset. And then inside of here, actually, before I do that, right above this row, I'm going to have an h1. And I'm just going to do something like image upload app. And let me style this a bit. So I'll do display -4, and then put some more margin at the top and bottom, and let's see how that looks so far. Oh yeah, I have to run my front end. So npm run dev. Close that up. Refresh. And let's see what we got. All right, so far looking pretty good. Now let's put together our form. So this is what I'm going to do. Right above here, actually, let me do it below the use effect. I'll have my on changes. So I have const, and I'm going to do on file change, where I have the event, and then I'm going to have an arrow function, and then I'm going to do my set, or the set image. So set image, and then I'm going to set it to e.target dot, and then here for file uploads, I'm going to do files at 0. So that's going to access the file, and then it's going to set my image right here, my image state to that file, so I can pass it along in my request. So I'm going to have one file input, and then I'm also going to have my text, or my text input, which is going to be for my alt text. So I'm going to do on text change, where I have my event, and then in that case, I'm going to do my set alt text. And then that's going to be e.target.value in that case. All right. So now let's start putting together this form. So I'm going to have form here. I'm going to have div with a class name of form group. So this first one's going to be for my image upload, or I guess the file field. And then I'm going to have my label. So I'm going to have image upload. I'm going to have my input. And then my input is going to have a class name of form-control. And then this label is going to have, this label is going to have a class name of form label. So that's going to be the bootstrap stylings for those. This is going to be a type of file. And then I'm going to have a name, which is going to be image. And then here I'm going to have an HTML4, which is going to be image. And then below that, I'm going to have my on change, which is going to be on file change. So this right here is going to be this, which is going to go ahead and set my image to the file that I upload. And I'm also going to set this to be a required field. So that's how I'm going to have this. And then below that, let me just copy this. And then let's start working on our next form field, which is going to be for alt text. So here I'm going to put alt text for my label. I'm going to have alt text. And then this is going to be a type of text. Name is going to be alt text. On change is going to be on text change. I think that's what I called it. Yep, on text change. And then I'm going to pass a value, which is going to be my alt, or it's going to be like this. Alt text, that's the state how I called it, which is right over here. All right. And now you also want to make sure inside of this type of file that you don't put a value of image, otherwise it will fail. So leave that out. And I believe this is all we're going to need here. So now I just need to put in my button. Let me also put in a little bit of margin just to space these form groups out a bit. And then put my button. So I'm going to have a class name of button success, just because I want it to be a green button. And I think I'll leave the default size. That should be good. And I'll probably want a little margin here as well. And then I'll also do a type of submit, which you don't really have to do, but I like to put it. And then for the text, I'll do upload image. All right, so let's see how this looks. All right, looking good. And then if I click this, there we go. I can select an image. So something like hockey skates I can put in here. So good. It places it in there. And then I can do super cool hockey skates. So awesome. This actually all works, these inputs. So now what I want here is to have my images. So one thing that I want to do is see if this is actually working. So I'll do a console.log on my images to see if I'm actually I shouldn't have any images now that I think about it, because I didn't upload any, so I won't do that. We'll do that a little later. First, let me do my onSubmit. So I'll do const on submit. Just going to take an event. And then also, by the way, for these on changes, you don't have to explicitly do the event passed onto here like so, because it's going to do it by default, which is why I left it like this. Just a little side note. So anyway, let me work on my onSubmit. So first thing I want is e.prevent default. This way I avoid the default behavior of refreshing the page on the submit. Let me also pass onSubmit equal to onSubmit. And again, I don't have to explicitly pass that event onto here. It'll do it automatically. So next thing I want to do is implement the logic for that API request. So this is the way I'm going to do that. Right here, I'm going to do async because I'm going to be making an asynchronous request. And then I'm going to have my const config, where I have my headers. I'll have an accept header of application JSON, because I will be retrieving JSON data, and it's just going to be that success message if we succeed, or it's going to be an error if we fail. And then I'm also going to have my content type. And then in this case, I'm not going to have application JSON. Instead, what we're going to have here is multipart/form-data. And then after that, I'm going to have my form data. So what I'm going to do is make a const form data, which I set to new form data, which is an interface in JavaScript that lets us conveniently create some form data that we can pass along in our request. And then I can do form data.append. And then here I can append the fields that I want. I want an image field, which I'm going to extract in my backend. And then here, I'm going to pass my image that I uploaded. So we're going to have access to that in our state here. And then the set image is whenever we upload a file, we're going to set that image, and then we're going to have access to it. And then I'm also going to want to do form data.append alt text. And then here I'm going to use my alt text piece of state. And then that's going to pass on those two pieces of data. I'm going to do const body is my form data. And then I'm going to have my try catch, where I actually have my API request. All right, so this try, I'm going to have const response is await axios.post, since I made this a post request. I'm going to do HTTP localhost 8000/API/image/upload is what I call that endpoint. I'll pass my body, I'll pass my config, and then we'll check if we have a 201 response. If that's the case, this was successful. And then in the case that we're successful, what I want to do is I want to update the images that I show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have another piece of state. I'm going to do const updated, set updated, which I'll set to use state. I'll just have by false. And then whenever this changes, I want to recall this endpoint to retrieve my images. So I'll pass in updated here. So whenever the value of updated changes, we run this use effect again to retrieve our images. So that'll be whenever I upload a new image. So inside of here, I'll do set updated, and then I'm just going to negate the value of updated. So that way we just change the value, rerun that use effect hook. So that's going to be whenever we upload. And then I'm not going to handle these like catch cases, but ideally what you want to do is probably have some kind of alerts or something, but I'm not going to do that just to not waste time on that. So the final thing that I want, actually before I work on this final thing, let me go open up my views.py, and then let's see these values. So for the upload image, let me print these values just to make sure that these are being passed correctly. So I'll save that. Then I'll have my Django terminal open. And then also one thing you might have noticed is we have these 400 bad requests. So that's actually a good thing. That means that our server isn't failing. What we're doing is we're checking if we have any images, if they exist. If they don't, we return this 400 bad requests. So that's working appropriately. Now let's test out this next part. So I'll choose a file. Let's pass this GoPro. And then I'll just pass GoPro as my alt text. I'll send off that request, and let's take a look. Awesome. So I have GoPro camera.jpg and GoPro for the alt text. So I'm retrieving both of those things successfully. And then I should also have this created. So because that's created, right now, when I refresh this, what should happen is I should actually retrieve those values. So right here I see I got a 200 OK from my API image retrieve images endpoint. So that's good. So that means that that's working appropriately. So I can close this up, and now let's go ahead and display these images. So the place where I'm going to be displaying these images is right over here. So I'm going to do an H3, and then I'm going to do images in my database, something like that. And then below that, I'm going to have my images. So let's see if I like the way that that text looks, or if I want to make it a little bigger. All right, that's pretty good, except I just need an S here. So I'll put that in. Whoops. And then the next thing I want to do is display my images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import image from Next.image. And then this is what I'm going to use for my images. And then I'm going to loop through, or I guess more specifically in JavaScript, I'm going to map through my images. And then I'm going to display those images using that image component. So I'm going to have some logic in here. And then let me take a look at my images. Yeah, so I set this as null by default. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if images doesn't equal null. And then if it's not null, I'm going to do images.map. And then I'm going to have image index arrow function. And then I'm going to have some round parentheses. So I'll be returning JSX here. And then I'm going to have my image. And then for my image, I'm going to pass a source. And then that source is going to be image.image. And then I'm going to have the alt, which is going to be image.altText. And then I also have to pass a width and a height. So I'll do it like so. And then for the width, I'll do something like 200. Height, I'll do like 150, let's say. And let's see if these images are displaying. So we see that right here we have the text GoPro. So the alt text is displaying. So now let's go ahead and see why this didn't work. So I know why it didn't work, but I just want to show you guys. So the reason why it didn't work is because our source that we're hitting is not the correct URL. So I guess it's not showing it very well here, but so what we want to do is we can pass in these backticks, and then I can wrap this like so. And then I need to have HTTP localhost 8000 here. So with that, now it's going to be the correct endpoint. So if I refresh, I should see that image show up now. But it looks like we still have another issue to deal with. So localhost is not configured under images in your Next config.js. And then to see more info, you can click here. So what we have to do is we have to pass this inside of our Next config.js inside of the module.exports. So I'm going to copy this, open up my side window, open up Next.config.js, and then right above here, I'll just paste that line, save that, and then because I changed this Next.config.js, I have to actually rerun my Next.js front end. So let me extend this a little bit, click on my terminal that's running my front end, stop running that, and then do an npm run dev to rerun it, and then I'll close that back up, and then I can go back to my front end application, and then we should see those images now show up. Alright, so it's still not working because there is one more thing we're actually going to have to do. So we're going to have to open up our image upload urls.py, and then we're also going to have to pass in our media URLs as well. So that way we can actually access those images. So I can do that with static, and then I have to actually import that. So I'm going to do from django.conf.urls.static. I'm going to import static. All right, so with that, the next thing I'm going to do is settings.media URL, and then document underscore root is going to be settings.media root. So then I also have to bring in my settings. So I'll do that, say, right above here. So from django.conf import settings. And then I'm going to save that. And then with that change, we should now be able to actually retrieve these images. All right, so we're still not able to retrieve these images. What's going on here? All right, so let me open up that Next.config.js. So I should have passed in localhost in here. And then with that, now it should work. All right, still not working. Oh yeah, because I have to rerun my... Oh my, okay. So npm run dev, now it should work. Although we do have an error showing up here. Let's see if that goes away. And there we are. We finally have our image showing up here. Although we will have one slight issue still because each child in a list needs a key prop. So let's do that real quick. So I'm going to go inside of my index.js. Let me close up these things I don't need anymore. And then instead of just returning this image, I'm going to have a div, which I use to wrap this. I'm going to indent this over. Then I'm going to have a class name, put a little bit of margin at the top and at the bottom. And then I'm also going to pass in that key. So I'll do key is equal to index. All right, and now we should be good. And then this should be /div. All right, so here we are. Although the spacing is still not how I want it. So let me also do class name of margin bottom 5 on this header. That way it looks a little bit better. And then we're going to test out uploading a couple more images. So let me upload another image. Let's say some ski goggles. Cool ski goggles. So I'm going to upload that. And there we go. It shows up. I'm not the biggest fan of the spacing and also the sizing of these images. They're all stretched, but that's not really the worry of this tutorial. All I wanted to show was how you can upload an image on the front end, send off a request, have that stored in the database, and then you can see it from there. And then another thing that you can also do if you want is you can go inside of the image admin.py. Then you can bring in from your models that image model, and then you can do an admin site register image, and then you can actually go into your admin panel and adjust this. So you'd have to create a super user to do that. So you can do python manage.py, create super user. I'm going to call it admin, put in a password, rerun my server, and then from there you can actually see the data that's inside of your database. So I can do localhost 8000 /admin/, put in my admin user, and then here's my images, and then here I can see my two images. So I have my GoPro, and I also have my cool ski goggles, and we see the appropriate alt text is showing up for both of these, so that's good. And then from here I can also delete these if I want. So there we are. Now you see how you can upload images with a Next.js front end, and then how you can pass that along to a Django backend and actually store that in your database. So I hope you guys enjoyed this cool little tutorial. And if you enjoyed this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to this channel, leave a like on the video, all that good stuff. Also, I have links in the description for joining my Facebook group if you want to join that and ask me questions personally. And yeah, that'll be everything. So I hope you guys enjoyed.